Welcome back in, everybody, to a Football Friday edition of Birds 365. Last Football Friday, Johnny Mac, we had a game to prepare for.
Yeah.
This Football Friday, we got to wait until Monday. So I hope everybody enjoys the weekend of football, the college tomorrow and tonight, and then the NFL on Sunday. You guys will have an open day, not worried about your Philadelphia Eagles until Monday night. There's both good and bad to that. I'd rather be playing on Sunday because that is my dedicated day for football. I love a football Sunday. So we will have to wait till Monday night, though. Johnny Mac, we're about to dive in. For those who have just tuned in, we're about to dive into the Eagles' defensive approach to stopping the Falcons. I think this could be a feast day for the Eagles' defense, depending on how they play it. But a couple things I want to get to before we get to that. James Carver leaves us a big super chat. James, thank you, brother. J Mac. He says 2 personal questions. Let's see, man. What do you grill on days you get to really watch football in general, like last and this weekend? That's a good one. You want to answer that before I go?
Well, I don't grill on football days. Yeah, that which is an issue, believe me. Yeah, I got to watch football, so yeah, I don't have time.
You don't get up before the 1 o'clock game start and get out on the grill,
No.
Johnny Mac. What kind of grill are you using, Johnny Mac? You got a Blackstone, you got a Weber. What are you using?
I do have a Weber, but yeah, I mean, in fact, I generally cook a bunch at once because my wife likes to make salads when she goes into work and put chicken on them. So I generally do a bunch of stuff at once, and she asked me to do it this way. And I'm like, I got to watch football. So yeah, you brought up a sore spot.
Oh man, Johnny Mac's got to keep it quiet in the house talking about that.
Yeah. And I had 4 Eagles to fill out the dinner table. Boy. Well, nothing against the Eagles, but if I'm inviting people to dinner, it's probably not the Eagles. But if I was forced to, and they would say the same thing, I get to spend too much time with them.
Is James talking about current Eagles, or is he talking about?
I think he's talking about color because of
current
Mailata.
Eagles. We'll go current Eagles because
definitely Mailata would be one of them, no question. Britton would be one of them. Britton Covey would definitely be one of them. Lane would be one of them because he is tremendously entertaining as well as very insightful. And then I go with Jalen Hurts because I want to see his guard down a little bit.
Yeah,
still guarded. But yeah, and Kelsey obviously would have been easy, but he's no longer here.
Yeah, Takeem puts who I would have went with. I would have went with Brandon Graham in there.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, BG's freaking hilarious. So
BG is great, man.
Maybe I can fit an extra chair in there. Yeah, that's a bad job by me.
I'm gonna give you my 4. I think I'd go Brandon Graham. I think I'd go AJ Brown, John. I am fascinated by AJ Brown. To me, and I saw something on my Twitter yesterday about from AJ Brown, and it was when he was with the Titans, but it was suicide or September, excuse me, is National Suicide Awareness Month. And AJ spoke very candidly about that back when he was with the Titans. And I just think he's a deep guy. I think there's so much more to AJ than meets the surface. So I'd probably go AJ Brown. I'm fascinated by him. I think he's a great football player, but he really seems to be a great person as well. So I'll take AJ Brown, Brandon Graham. I'd probably go Saquon. I'd probably go Saquon. He's got roots in the area. I think I'd take Saquon. And to close it out, who can I go to close it out? Give me. What do I have? I have BG.
I immediately went entertainment based, which is
Yeah.
probably more emphasis on it because I love AJ. AJ would be good, but I'm thinking like Jordan's going to entertain me.
Smitty's a good one. I could close mine out with Smitty.
Yeah, BG's going to entertain me. I should have said. Now people ask me who my favorite Eagles are all the time, and I joke. I take a picture of Noah or what's the other Eagle they bring for training camp? Reggie, I think. or Reggie the dog, who was the team dog. Those are my favorite Eagles. But people-wise, I always joke it's Glenn Pry, Don Henley, Joe Walsh, and then I joke Brandon Graham. I will say Brandon because Brandon's like the best person in the world.
Yeah, he really is. He is behind the scenes too. I've talked to him many times behind the scenes. He's really a great.
I don't root for the Eagles, which upsets people sometimes, but I root for people. I root for people I like.
That shouldn't upset anybody. That's the reason this show is so good, because you're an objective analyst of the team. You call it how you see it, the good, the bad, the ugly, and I really think that's what makes this show so good. So I don't think that should upset anybody.
Yeah, and I think it's natural. I mean, once you get to know people and they're good people, you naturally root for
Yeah, right.
them.
That's human psychology, man. You root
Yeah.
for people. Yeah.
So it's easy to root for individuals, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I generally don't have favorite Eagles. I have favorite people on the Eagles, and that's why I say Glenn Fry and Don Henley.
Good question, James Carver. Thanks for doing that. A little bit of off subject, but it was a lot of fun to do it. I see everybody in the chat. A lot of people put some good stuff up. I think I'd close mine out with Smitty. That's what I would do. So I had Brandon Graham, I had AJ Brown, I had Smitty, and Saquon Barkley would be my 4. So a good 4 there. Johnny Max was a good 4 as well. So good question there. James Carver, thanks for doing that, man. A little bit of off subject, but it's nice to get deeper. We talk 10 hours a week on this football team. It's good to spend 10 minutes, doing some other stuff. So thanks, James, for that. John, let's get back into the game here. From a defensive approach, like I said before the break, I think this could be a feast day for the Eagles defense if that defensive line shows up coming into this game. What's your approach from a defensive standpoint to slow down Kirk Cousins and this offense? They do have a lot of weapons.
Yeah, it's all about Bijan. I mean, it's all about Bijan. Back to Bijan 365 because the Falcons can say what they want, and they all claim that Kirk Cousins is healthy. He's not healthy. He certainly wasn't. He certainly was restricted last week. He's a play action quarterback. He didn't play under center. Because he couldn't take the snap and push off and hand off, never mind throw the ball. So, Nick Sirianni brought up a good point and said, sometimes when you go through that and that type of rehab and that type of significant rehab, especially when you're older, when Kirk's 36, I believe, sometimes you have good days and sometimes you have the bad days. And you're not feeling as good. And sometimes you feel great. And, maybe he felt bad on Sunday and maybe of last week and maybe on Monday of next week, he feels great and you got to deal with it. But until I see it, I find it very hard to believe the guy that was out there last week is going to be throwing for his typical 300 plus yards. Last game here, we were talking about it. So he threw for 364 yards and 4 touchdowns and a 125.6 passer rating. So the Eagles won the game, but they had some issues stopping him throwing the football. That was pre-Achilles injury. That guy wasn't there last week. So, number one, the hope is from the Eagles standpoint that he's not completely healthy. Because he did not look good against Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh also has TJ Watt. The Eagles aren't getting TJ Watt this week, and he wrecked that game. But Bijan is the guy, I would be, he's number one, and everybody else, it's like, who cares at this point? So everything is, I would imagine, starts with Bijan Robinson this week.
Yeah, no doubt. I saw a video that floating around of Kirk at practice yesterday. I think it was Kurt Benkert or somebody who put it up. Kurt Benkert put it up. He does not look like he is moving good, John. I don't know if it's just a lack of confidence or he's just not healthy yet. He does not look like he can move on that leg, and it really takes away a big part of Kirk Cousins' game where he rolls out, he does the play action. There's a lot of stuff that Kirk thrives on that require him. He's not a running quarterback, but it does require him to have some mobility in the pocket. Doesn't seem like he has it. He could be a sitting duck, as we've talked about this week, and really could get beat up on if he can't move well.
Yeah, and Vic got asked about Michael Penix if he's got to prepare for him, and it's like they're not concerned about that, probably because of how much the Falcons paid Kirk Cousins. To be honest, it's going to be very difficult to go away from him. And yeah, it's more of you got to prepare for the guy he was than the guy he seems to be, and that's how the Eagles will approach it, I'm sure. But then you were just talking about human nature. There's a human nature aspect of it that they're watching the film and they're saying to themselves, well, this guy's not healthy, and that's what Nick was trying to curtail, I think, a little bit with explaining the rehab process and, whether it's a torn ACL, torn Achilles like he suffered, which was in week 8 last season. And by the way, he was having his best season. He was completing 70% of his passes. This is week 8, so it's not even halfway through the season. And they were killing Green Bay, and Green Bay is completing 70% of his passes, 2,300 yards already, 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. I mean, they were going to make the playoffs, and the Packers weren't. If he were healthy for 17 games, no, quite. I mean, they're a playoff team. He was playing really well. That guy didn't show up last week.
No, he definitely didn't. So, we're going to see how it looks this week, no doubt, because that pass rush, I think, is the key to the game. We talked about Saquon, or not Saquon. We talked about Bijan Robinson and taking him out of the game, but I think that this week is a chance for everybody's talked about that they were non-existent last week, the pass rush. This is their week, baby. They could really blow this game up if the defensive line of the Eagles shows up. What do you think of that matchup? And Kirk Cousins might be seeing shadows all night if the pass rush shows up.
Yeah, interesting matchup because I do think the Falcons, again, have a pretty good offensive line. I don't think it's great like the Eagles, but it's pretty good. Right side, I think, is very good with Chris Lindstrom and Caleb McGarry. I think McGarry's a little bit, he was on the injury report, so he's a little bit banged up, so maybe that helps. Jake Matthews, the Matthews family, they're just good. And then they're a little bit weaker on the interior, so maybe it's a Jalen Carter game. You really need to see something from Bryce Up and Nolan Smith.
Who's the tackle who's going up against McGarry?
McGarry's the right tackle. Matthews is the left tackle. They're both pretty good.
Yeah, they are.
They're certainly a top 10. We were talking about tandems. They're a top 10 tandem. I wouldn't put them in the group I mentioned. But I was looking at Huff yesterday because I wrote about Huff because I was talking to him. I mean, I got to
I read your article on Huff. Yeah,
he had 68 pressures last year and 21 quarterback hits
and 10 sacks.
I mean, I find it very hard to believe that guy can't rush the passer.
And he had a top 3 pass rush win rate in the NFL, behind guys like I think Micah Parsons and T.J. Watt. Or
and one, I forget which one because all those things are subjective a little bit, but they're close. I mean, one of them had him number 1. Yeah. I think it was Next Gen Stats had him number 1, or it might have been vice versa. It might have been PFF, but one of them had him number 1 in the entire league, pressure rate, pressure percentage, whatever you want to call it. And the other one had him number 3. Either or, that's fine. Yeah, I find it very hard to believe this guy just forgot how to rush the passer because he changed teams or because he got a bigger check. But he's got to show it. And I thought he'd show it in Brazil, but he couldn't show it in Brazil, which I hope people realize, but they don't seem to realize that.
Falcons have two guards, Johnny Mac. One of them is good. One of them is not so good. Lindstrom is pretty good,
Yeah,
but
Lindstrom's
Bergeron is the other one. Could it be a Jalen Carter day if they get him lined up against him?
Yeah, I mentioned Jalen. Yeah, it should be a Jalen Carter day, and he didn't play well in Brazil for obvious reasons. So, I mean, yeah, the Eagles got to get it going, and um, yeah, I mean, Jalen Carter's got to be the best defensive player on this team,
Yeah, he does.
and it wasn't that way in Week 1, which it didn't matter because Zach Bond came out of nowhere. And Reed played very well. Reed Blankenship as well, but ultimately, long term, yeah, Jalen Carter's got to be the guy. And yeah, Bergeron is not good, especially, and he's worse as a pass blocker than he is as a run blocker. So, I mean, that should be tailor made for Jalen Carter. And then you add on top of it, the quarterback can't move. So there's no reason. There will be no more mulligans on Tuesday on this program. If this defensive front doesn't show up in this game, it's time to start being concerned.
You heard it here first, everybody, on Friday's edition. No more mulligans. Callie, baby, that one's for you. No more mulligans, brother. So let's get our super chat, John. We got a good super chat, and Chip, thanks for doing the super chat because I did want to talk about Devin White and his comments yesterday. Chip Tooth checks in, one of our best viewers. Chip, thanks for being here, brother. We appreciate the support. He says, John, since no one else has stepped up, I will be the first to apologize for you being right about Nakobe.
That is the first. Congrats.
Even
You
though
are
I
the
agreed
first.
with you, I still feel like you're owed an apology. Does 45 play at all? Speaking about Devin White. Chip, thanks for the Superman. Johnny Mac, what do you have to say?
No, not on defense, barring injury, of course. No, he's not going to play. The linebackers are Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond. And that doesn't mean they won't need him at some point, which is how everyone is spinning it. And it's probably right. Nakobe has a history of injuries last year, so you have to worry about that. Zach is not used to playing as many snaps as he played. So will they need him at some point? Yes, probably. But if those guys are healthy, if it turns into a TJ Edwards, Kaiser White situation, those guys aren't leaving the field. So there's no room for the third linebacker. But I assume you're talking about a rotational thing or getting that. No, that's not. It's not in the mix, and it's fine. I don't think And by the way, Devin's very professional. I don't know where
Yeah, I thought he handled it well.
he handled it very well. And I said that right away. I said he doesn't strike me as the guy that's going to be an issue. And hopefully that's the case. But yeah, it's the nature of the NFL, and that's how big it is. Nakobe won the job, and that's where it is right now.
I do understand from Devin's perspective, though, like he got so many first team reps. Like I get it. He didn't win the job. He was given every opportunity to win it. But like as a player, when I just try and put myself in his shoes, I would be like, what the fuck, man? So I don't know.
Yeah, but it was, but as a player, I get it from Devin's perspective. I mean, he's like, you got to have confidence in yourself. If you're not going to believe in yourself, who's going to believe in you? So from his standpoint, he's taken, like, I don't think anybody noticed, not anybody. There's a bunch of us that noticed, but there's a bunch of people that didn't notice that while the first rep didn't change, and it was Devin White and Zach Bond for, I believe they had 16 practices open to the media in its entirety. For 15 of the 16 practices, those were the first two on the field. So they took the first rep. by the last week of camp, they were rotating so much. I think everybody shut their notebook. Again, not everybody. DeCecco's one of them. Few of them. Nakobe's getting more first team reps. So if you're not paying attention to the entirety of the practice and you just say, oh, he's the starter, I always go back as an old school basketball guy, the last Sixers championship team, which was 1983. How many years ago was that, by the way? That's
A
sad.
lot.
1983. Mark Ibaroni was the starter. Back then it was more structured, power forward. Bobby Jones was the backup. Bobby Jones is in the Hall of Fame, for those who don't know old school basketball. Bobby Jones played more minutes. Bobby Jones finished. Bobby Jones played in the key spots. So just because he was out there the first snap, Nakobe had overtaken him by the final week, and it was pretty clear. And as Vic said when he was talking about competition, it will become obvious. It was obvious to people who were paying attention.
Good stuff, Chip Tooth. Thank you for the super chat. Johnny Mac got a lot of hate this summer, saying he didn't think Devin White was going to be what people expected him to be. So I appreciate the apology for Johnny Mac, Chip Tooth. Appreciate you being here, brother. John, a couple more super chats to get to, and then we'll get to our man Thomas Mott in hour number 2 here, coming up at 9:20. So just 14 minutes till we get to Thomas. Dirty Air says, completely fantasy hypothetical. Is there anything of value on the Dolphins worth trying to shop Kenny Pickett to them for?
Where are they?
Edge,
No,
draft
the Eagles.
capital.
The Eagles are not trading Kenny Pickett. Now, if the Dolphins wake up and say, we're going to give you a first round pick for Kenny Pickett, maybe that changes. But Kenny Pickett was
they
brought
better
here.
get that deal, John.
Yeah, well, they would, but
yeah,
I'm saying
they're not going to give him a first.
No. The Eagles brought Kenny Pickett here to be the backup quarterback, not only for this year, but the cost-effective nature of being on this rookie deal. Because the backup quarterback market has gotten pretty expensive for very little return. I use Marcus Mariota as an example of that. He basically did nothing here and got a raise to go to Washington. And the Eagles saw the opportunity to get a player they liked and have him locked up for a couple years, very similar to what they did with Gardner Minshew, and then he probably leaves. But no, they're not trading Kenny Pickett other than if Miami loses their senses and turns in. And by the way, Rick Spielman hangs out at their facility all the time, so maybe he was the last one to lose his senses. So maybe it comes to that. But
I'm already seeing the Photoshop Brady in the Dolphins jersey pictures all over social media.
Yeah, well, and there's a bunch of guys who aren't even. I don't think Ryan Tannehill is signed yet. I believe I have to double check. So, yeah, they got to do something because I don't know. The 5 minutes I saw of Skylar Thompson were not good.
No, they were not.
So they definitely have to do something. Yeah, and Ryan Tannehill's a free agent. I would think he's number 1 on the list. And obviously he was top 10 pick of the Dolphins way back in early 2012. So yeah, he would I would think he would be number 1. But other than Miami losing their minds and offering a first round pick, no, you're stuck with Kenny Pickett. And by the way, I think he's one of the better backup quarterbacks in this league, Kenny Pickett. And I think the Eagles are very happy with him. I think about all the bad quarterback play you saw this weekend.
There's so much. It's crazy. Even the guys who are getting paid big bucks are
And I think the second part of it is people don't realize if Kenny Pickett looking bad in preseason with second team reps and players that aren't even here, if he were forced to play, God forbid, if he were forced to play, he'd be playing with Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and Saquon. It would be better than if he's playing with guys that aren't here anymore. I mean, so, yeah.
That's why I'm surprised our man Niners all damn day is in the chat. That's why I'm surprised, Johnny Mac, you're so tough on Brock Purdy, all the crappy quarterback play in
I'm
the
not
league.
tough on Brock Purdy. I'm shocked that Brock deserves all the credit in the world, but I think there's limitations, and I'm shocked about how slowly the league is going and trying to expose those limitations, shall I say. But he's proven himself to be a good quarterback. I just don't think he's a great quarterback.
That's fair.
And I might be wrong.
Yeah, we'll
he's
see.
playing
I mean,
great.
he is with Shanahan, and obviously everything around him.
Well, this is a good week because they're playing Minnesota this week, and that's Brian Flores. So Brian Flores is going to bring it. So this is a good week. But last year they play, I believe, San Francisco played Minnesota last year, and that might have been his worst game. So if that happens again,
I think that McCaffrey injury, John, is a little scary if you're a San Francisco fan. What was it, tendinitis or something?
Achilles tendinitis.
Yeah, that could linger. You don't want to hear that. So we'll see if McCaffrey gets back out there, John. One more super chat, just 9 minutes or 8 minutes away or so from getting our man Thomas Mott up. So James Carver checks in here with a question about Bryce Huff. He says, is there any possibility that Huff was successful in part because he was more unknown, akin to Hurts being really successful until teams started to know what he was going to do? And now Huff needs more moves to regain his numbers. James, I think it's a fair point, man. He was not a top edge rusher on that New York Jets team, so he could kind of come in on a rotational role, and he really produced in that role. Now he's a top guy. Now he's expected to produce game in and game out. Johnny Mac, what do you think of what James Carver had to say?
Well, it's kind of just what I said about Brock Purdy in a more high-profile environment. Yeah, I mean, it could be people not, paying attention, game planning, not being ready for it. The Eagles certainly got surprised by him when the Jets upset him. Now Lane Johnson got hurt in that game, so that factored into it as well. So that could be a part of it. And certainly the expectations, if he's placing them upon himself, could be a part of it. But boy, I mean, I saw the guy play, and it was pretty electric. And I haven't seen that yet, but I do think you throw last week out. And I don't care about preseason. I just don't.
Yeah.
So if he shows up and he doesn't, and he's playing, they have good tackles with Atlanta. And if he looks like there's no juice and there's no, then I think it's time to start worrying. But I find it very hard to believe he lost that. He's not old. He's 25, 26 years old. I think people are going to be excited to see him when the shrink wrap comes off, but Sid, I admit it's speculation, but I find it very hard to believe that athleticism is gone, and he's going to give people some headaches.
What about the point about the pass rush moves, though? I think that's a fair point.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're a one-trick pony, I mean, that's the issue with I see that more with Nolan than Bryce. Right. I mean, Nolan Smith is just pure speed and nothing else. I don't get that feeling with Bryce.
Which isn't going to work when you have a seasoned tackle you're going against.
Yeah. So I have that concern more with Nolan Smith than Bryce Huff, but it could be both. And that would be a bad situation for the Eagles.
Sights are set on Bryce Huff this week, Johnny Mac. Week 2, Monday Night Football, back at the link. So no No mulligans, no excuses on the field. So we'll see what he's able to do.
Well, who
And that whole
knows?
defensive line.
Maybe the weather turns and we get another crap. Who knows? I haven't
I
checked
don't
the
know
weather
about that, but
forecast.
we'll see. Get the right cleats for some rain
Yeah.
if you need to. Oh, John, real quick, I wanted to say this, dude. We had Sal Palantonio on last night on This Week in Pro Football, which is syndicated on Jacob Sports with Pat Callahan. Sal does a great job. Obviously, he's been with ESPN for a long time. He was down there at Corinthians Arena, and
Yeah,
he said,
Sao Paulo and Sao Paulo. Yeah.
"Yeah, right." We joked with him that they made the game for him. But anyway, he said down there, he was down there Thursday. He said the field looked awesome. The turf looked great. He said Friday morning they had sprinklers come up and they watered the field on Friday, midday and Friday. And he's like, I don't know if that's the full reason, but they wet the field on Friday and then everybody was slipping around out there. And Thursday it didn't seem to be a problem at all. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting to listen to. I'm like, man, did the grounds crew put
Yeah,
on
I mean,
sprinklers? And
I was talking to Britton about that a lot yesterday, and yeah, he called it worse than the Super Bowl,
yeah,
and part of the JJ Watt brought up, um, you want a different sort of environment for soccer players, football down there, but soccer players up here. And that's what you want for soccer players. You want the field to be more like that. Maybe they just didn't know, but the NFL's got to be in charge of these things. They got to explain we don't need that. We don't we they they have to be more proactive with that stuff. That's an NFL problem. And it
agree.
was a disaster. And everybody knows it was all the players, nobody's making excuses. They won the game. There's no reason to make excuses, but um it's just an explanation to some points and Nick was asked um, about how do you evaluate. And he admitted it's more difficult because it is. There's obvious reasons why certain things aren't being accomplished. And speaking to Bryce specifically, he had mentioned he felt he got off the ball well. He got to his spots well. He was beating guys to his spots, and then became the issue because you couldn't plant and you couldn't use that explosion on sort of your pass rushing setup. And it affected everybody, not just Bryce Huff on both sides. And then you have Zach Bond. Um, I guess the elite cleat picker. I don't know what else to say. But why did Zach Bond excel? I can't explain it. And Reed Blankenship to a certain degree as well. Because Zach Bond was phenomenal. Should have been player of the week.
No doubt. The excuses are gone here going into week 2. So we'll see how they end up doing. Seth checks in, says, I'm happy to see no hip drop tackle penalties yet. Yes, Seth, you're right. And there was some hip drop tackles. So they didn't call penalties on them, but there definitely was some hip drop tackles.
Yeah, they can call a hip drop tackle if they stop calling illegal formation. Good God.
No, Johnny. Don't get Johnny Mac started on the over legislation. We'll be here till 11 a.m. But good stuff. Thanks, everybody in the chat. You guys have been tremendous, as always. Great super chats today. Coming up, Thomas Mott from the Thomas Mott Show on YouTube. You guys are most likely familiar with him. He does great work all over YouTube. So we're going to talk to Thomas Mott next. Before we get to our break, I want to tell you guys about BetUS, our newest partner here on Jacob Sports. If you're looking for a new sports book, go to betus.com.pa. They have just upgraded their promotion for all of our YouTube listeners. So it is now YouTube 150 is the code. You can go to betus.com.pm and use that code, and you will get up to 150% sign up bonus. So you can deposit less and get more from BetUS. They have the fastest payouts in the industry. They have 24/7 personalized customer support, and you can even get your own account manager. So go to betus.com.pa. Let's take some prop bets, everybody, on Saquon, on AJ, and on Jalen. I think they're going to have big games this week, and maybe even a prop bet on Bryce Huff. It might even be the under on Bryce Huff if you're not confident in Bryce Huff. But go to betus.com.pa. Thank you to BetUS for sponsoring this edition of Birds 365. We thank our sponsors and we thank all of our viewers. Let's get to our commercial break. We'll be back in 3 minutes with Thomas Mott on the other side.
If you missed any of today's show on the Jacob Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.